Tuskegee Airmen getting ready for the takeoff roll. The sound of freedom from 60 years past. We've got the music going, but I'm going to fade it now. So different from the sound of the F4U Corsair, this is the liquid-cooled V12 Packard Merlin engine of the Tuskegee Airmen's P-51. That sound is sound of freedom from the past 60 years. Did you notice the short canopy? The Razorback behind that canopy and the red tail? While the airplane gets to an altitude for its first pass, let's talk about the C-model Mustang's role as the signature aircraft of the Tuskegee Airmen. Designed to prove the black men could not fly. They were so wrong. Black men couldn't fly. They couldn't fight. And the pilots who trained at the segregated Tuskegee Airmen field proved it. Look, ladies and gentlemen, if you will, high and over your shoulder to the right.
Flying early,
And Bill Shepard approaches for his first pass. Initially, the Tuskegee Airmen were not allowed to escort bombers and were sent only on low-priority missions like strafing ground targets. These types of missions kept them from finding enemy aircraft and scoring victories against the enemy, a further effort by the military higher-ups to prove they could not do the job. However, when they were finally allowed to escort missions, the Mustang's agility and power let them succeed beyond anyone's expectations. From your right, let's look for the strafing pass, 400 miles per hour. If you're diving at a locomotive in Italy or Germany, that's the last thing that the enemy wanted to see, the flying C-model Mustang. The Tuskegee Airmen destroyed over 125 of the enemy's locomotives and 600 boxcars and sank a German destroyer. In addition to strafing, the airmen performed bombing missions carrying two 500-pound bombs near P-51C Mustangs. Diving from high altitude to avoid ground fire, the Tuskegee Airmen destroyed over 80 motor transports, 10 radar installations, and 23 factories with those bombs and machine gun fire. Ladies and gentlemen, it's Bill Shepard in the P-51C doing its 30-degree angle dive bomb run. All right, the CAF Red Tail Squadron flies this Mustang to create interest in history. And Bill Shepard coming in from your left, setting up for a 30-degree descent. This is the bomb lob pass. The story of the Tuskegee Airmen is one of courage and persistence. They set a goal to be the best Army Air Corps pilots they could be and met that goal. The CAF Red Tail Squadron's new Rise Above Traveling exhibit tells the story of the Tuskegee Airmen by showing a film about them called Rise Above. The movie shows how the Tuskegee Airmen were initially shunned by the white bomber pilots because of the color of their skin. The airmen endured a lot because of the military segregation policies. However, when they finally were given their chance, the airmen's performances became legendary. They never sought personal fame for themselves by chasing after enemy aircraft. Rather, they earned their reputation and their medals by sticking close to the bombers they escorted and protecting them from enemy fire. As a result of their discipline and training, the Tuskegee Airmen built one of the best escort records in the U.S. Army Air Corps. Because they were so successful, white bombers that's why you have to work the white bomber pilots were able to the Tuskegee Airmen. As escorts, the airmen destroyed over 400 enemy aircraft. Look straight ahead now, and to your right as the Mustang comes in for the photo pass. Nearly 1,000 black pilots received flight training at the segregated base in Tuskegee, Alabama, while over 14,000 black support personnel trained in shooting field and Illinois and other bases. 445 fighter pilots and their crews operated as a segregated combat unit crew in North Africa and the Mediterranean and finally in Europe. 66 Tuskegee Airmen gave their lives. 32 were captured as prisoners of war. The airmen were awarded over 850 medals, including the Presidential Unit Citation, the highest award that can be given a military unit. This is a story of incredible courage and patriotism. The Tuskegee Airmen were willing to serve and die for their country, not willing to serve them because of the color of their skin. Their amazing accomplishments are reflected in the 6 guiding principles that the CAF Red Tail Squadron uses in their educational mission. Aim high, believe in yourself, use your brain, never quit, be ready to go, and expect to win. These are the messages we can benefit from, don't you think? The Rise Above Traveling exhibit is here on the grounds of the Dayton Airshow, and I encourage you to stop by to see the movie and learn more about the Tuskegee Airmen. By the way, that exhibit is here, and it is free. Now, let's quiet down and listen to the sound. This particular engine cools with a radiator like your car or truck, and the coolant that keeps the engine cool. The enemy knew that if they shot that radar and the coolant leaked out, the engine would get hot, it would steam, and you had an airplane with a glide ratio of a falling cement block. The P-51C Mustang Tuskegee Airman has been restored twice and is operated by the volunteers of the Commemorative Air Force's Red Tail Squadron in Minnesota. The Commemorative Air Force is the largest flying museum in the world with over 140 aircraft, mostly World War II vintage, located in more than 100 wings and squadrons all across America and around the world. Getting ready to accept that cover over the top is the only flying B-29 in the world today, known as Fifi. It is Humana, one of Ohio's largest medical insurance providers that are sponsoring the B-29 this weekend. Humana is excited to be a part of this year's air show. Long-standing relationship with active duty and retired military men and women, and the Health and Benefits Company continues to find new ways to support our For more information on Humana, veterans initiative, visit Humana-veterans.com. Or visit one of our 2 air show centers located near the pavilion, that's one place, or next to the B-29 aircraft when it goes back on display after its flight. Humana brings us the B-29 today. Now let's tell them about this magical airplane that helped end the war in the Pacific, the end of World War II. The B-29 Superfortress was rushed into duty without prototypes, as I recall, long range necessary to get to the enemy's heartland. Now the Rise Above P-51 Mustang is going to do a flight formation like it did for the B-17 and the B-24 4-engine bomber crews as they went deep into enemy territory and reduced the terrible attrition rate on those daylight bombing raids. Ladies and gentlemen, 2 heroes of the sky. I think we should just listen to the sound of 5 engines and appreciate the men who flew them. Now, 3,970 of the B-29s, that's the 4-engine aircraft, were built. That's the only one flying. You've heard us say it 100 times. It brought to you by Humana. It came at a massive cost in development. You might remember from World War II the Manhattan Project. That project had a budget of $4 billion, $300 million. The B-29 was more expensive than that. That's how necessary it was. Each airplane ended up costing the government $605,000. And when you contrast that to the B-51 that is flying cover for the B-29, that airplane came in at about $50,000. So you can see the awesome amount of difference. It is organizations like the original Confederate Air Force that got this airplane out of China Lake and was able to fly it for many years. Then catastrophic engine problems deemed it unsafe, until the miracle of miracles happened and American technology and generosity took over. As the B-29 comes in from your right, ladies and gentlemen, will you get ready? As the crew on board lines up the aircraft, they'll also be looking down at the spectators as they give you a little left bank turn to fill up your cameras. Wave like crazy to the crew, if you will. Thank you to all the volunteers of the commemorative Air Force. Rob's going to introduce the crew to you. The pilot, Mark Novak from Omaha, Nebraska. The co-pilot, Niels Agather from Fort Worth. The engineer, Don Thurst. The right scanner, Karen Landis. The left scanner, Terry Singer. And the APU operator, Joe Kalberer. It takes a lot of people to run this airplane, but one of the big advancements, in addition to pressurization to keep the pilots and crews warm, was a very unique fire control system that could be operated by one person sitting under a small bubble in the top and could assign each gun to other operators, unheard of prior to that time. Another one of the developments that made the airplane successful was relatively short-lived. It had one purpose, and it accomplished that purpose, so it was pretty much reduced or eliminated from the inventory, retired, I should say, in 1960. Before that time, used by the United States Army Air Forces, and then used by the Air Force after it was started in 1947, and also used by the Royal Air Force. All right, we're in on the last pass, and then we're going to take the airplane back to the spectator area. I want to remind you, as the award-winning Aeroshell team taxis out, in the military, it spent a lot of good times and bad times with the B-29 during World War II. And it was his direction and his help to cut through the red tape and get the airplane out of the military inventory and into the hands of civilian operators to bring it to air shows like this. One of the pilots is Neil Agather. We're talking about his father who helped so much. Then, if that wasn't enough, Rob Ryder, Vic Agather put money out of his own pocket to keep the airplane operational. So that's the reason for the A on the tape. Vic Agather is the father of this airplane. That's the military he guided this airplane through World War II. That's the A and probably will never be removed. His son is now flying in the right seat of the airplane. Now, the name Fifi? Well, Vic Agather's wife, Niels Agather's mother, her real name is Josephine, and all her life she had a nickname that you might guess is Fifi. So as a tribute to that family, that name will probably never change either. Folks across the country, there are 22 other aircraft in museums. We have one here in Dayton, the Enola Gay, the one that Paul Tibbets flew. He's in the Smithsonian. At the Smithsonian at the Haase Museum south of Washington Dulles Airport. And then across the country there are that 22, inventory of 22, with the two states of Georgia and California, each having 3 in different locations on display. To the right, first, setting up for the pass and a fighter break. They'll bring the inbound with the B-29 Fifi. Now, the B-29, folks, is a flight engineer's airplane. He has got 4 levers, 4 switches, 4 dials, 4 on-off switches, 4 medium switches, 4 spring control switches. He's the guy that is busy when the pilots go for a power setting. It will be the engineer that moves the throttles and the RPM on the engines and not the pilots. They'll have their hands on the throttles, but they'll be calling to him. They look out of the cockpit. Right about it now, as they set up at their target speed, I'm just going to guess, I may be wrong, let's try for 130, 130 knots. The power is probably at this weight. RPM is set for 2400, and the power is, I'm going to guess, I may be way wrong, probably 26 inches of manifold pressure on all of the engines, maybe 28. Now they'll be looking for that speed. If it increases, the pilot will say manifold pressure 26. And if it still increases manifold pressure 25. That's a reduction in power. And as it gets slowed up, he'll say, okay, manifold pressure 24.
So he's got 2,400 RPM and 24 inches of manifold pressure. That is a wag. It may not be exact. Now they're going to want to come in over the trees at a specific altitude to be able to touch down on the numbers, as they say, about 1,000 to 1,200 feet down the runway. As they slow up, you'll see that nose gear come up in a non-stabilized approach. You'll see the nose gear lower than the main gear. That's unusual for today in a jet because they use the stabilized approach in a nose-high attitude. As the pilot comes in, they continue to tweak the manifold pressure and not necessarily the RPM.
Mark Novak at the controls, the flight engineer not facing forward.
All right, now the pilot will come in with a big handful of trim, and he'll have the throttles. He brings the throttles back against the stops. He continues to trim. The main gear touches down, and then the nose gear touches down, and that's the way you fly a B-29. Let's reintroduce that crew, Round Rider. They did a magnificent job with that airplane. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Oh, and thank you, too, to who else but our sponsor, Humana, for bringing that airplane here.
The pilot, Mark Novak from Omaha, Nebraska. The co-pilot, Neil Zagather, the grandson of the man who gave it the name. Engineer Don Thurston, right scanner, Karen Landis, left scanner, Terry Sanger, and the APU, the Auxiliary Power Unit operator, is Joe Calverer, and touching down behind it, the red-tailed P-51 flown by Bill Shepard, representing the Tuskegee Airmen and the Rise Above exhibit. Ladies and gentlemen, your commemorative Air Force at work preserving the aircraft that gave us our freedom today. No place paid personnel.